Hey, what's up guys? John here. Joe Biden just came out with a whole new plan for housing in America, and I believe it's going to have a profound impact on how we invest in property, both single family, multifamily, commercial property. I think it's going to change everything. I think we're at the beginning stages of this whole thing. So here's kind of what I see happening and how I see this whole thing playing out. Before I begin, please hit the like button and share this video with a real estate investor, a friend that is interested in the space. So what I see happening are two things. First is we're seeing a whole new spin from the media about how capitalist corporations are taking advantage of everyday citizens, and they are manipulating the current chain of events to increase prices and take advantage of the general public. And they're also spinning that same narrative towards real estate investors and investors across all spectrums in real estate, saying that the landlord is the problem, right? And so in some cases, sure, but in many cases, that's incorrect. Their costs have been increasing greatly across the board as well, whether it be managing the properties, repair costs, the labor in which they have to hire to fix these apartments, the vacancies that they're now seeing. There's been a lot of problems that landlords have been forced to deal with, and like all businesses, they push those costs onto the consumer, and so we're seeing rising costs throughout the rental space. And Joe Biden, he right now is saying that we need to build out a whole new plan to make housing more affordable. And so a lot of people will say, great, yes, we do need to do that, especially when we see rents as a whole nationally on the average up 18.5%. I mean, that is ridiculous. But you have to realize that traditionally rents increase by about 3% per year. So, you have 6 years worth of rent increases inside of 1 year, and it looks like things are only getting worse. But if we also look at produce, used cars, everything else, I mean, that's all up 20, 30, 40%. So it's keeping up with everything else. And Joe Biden has this massive new plan to reshape real estate. And why I believe everyone should be paying close attention to this is because American housing has always been a staple, a wealth building staple. And a lot of people have been addicted to this staple the last couple of years because they're afraid of inflation. And they want to, they want to park money and borrow money at, let's say, 3% or 4% interest rate fixed over 30 years. So they're buying duplexes and fourplexes and locking in these low rates and just renting out the properties as a great retirement plan, a backup plan for their families down the road. But Joe Biden has this whole new plan. And so we have these two things happening. One, I see him taking aggressive action towards housing. As he was talking about price controls before, I see him essentially trying to take this direction with housing, which is going to have a really, really big impact on the housing space. And then two, interest rates. Interest rates rising at a time when everything else is happening. Interest rates do a couple things, right? And so if you don't know anything about multifamily housing, for the most part, how these deals are looked at is basically a cap rate. And cap rate is net operating income divided by the purchase price. And so what that would look like is if you have here's a perfect example. Let's say that you purchase a property, it's $1 million, and you put, brings in annual gross income of $90,000. So you had $1 million, you invested the full $1 million, all cash, no mortgage, because they don't take into account your debt load when they're looking at net operating income or cap rate or any of these formulas. So $90,000 gross income, operating expenses, say 20%, say it's a newer building, vacancy rate about 5%. The older the building, the more operating expenses generally are going to go into it because it's going to cost more to service. 5% vacancy, so annual net income, $68,400. The cap rate, which means if you paid all cash, you'd get a return of roughly 6.84%, right? And so that's decent. That's decent. Generally, the better area that you go into, like a Santa Monica or Venice Beach or one of these prime areas, it's going to be a lower return because more investors are chasing to get into that market. But if you go into a neighborhood that has high unemployment, a lot of crime, not as desirable, then you might get a 10 or 12 or 15% return, but you're going to take on a lot more risk. You're going to have a lot more headaches in most of those cases. Now, when interest rates go up, what happens? Cost of borrowing money goes up, right? And so this $1 million formula, investors generally don't pay all cash. They'll borrow, let's say 70%, they'll put 30% down, or they'll put 30 or 40% down and they'll borrow the rest. right? And so as interest rates go up, the borrowing cost goes up. So on this formula, let's just say this was a fourplex, right? On this formula, or five units, this is $1 million property. They put 200 grand down, right? So 2.85% interest rate is $5,200 a month, right? $5,200 a month. Now, if interest rates where they are now at 5.4%, it's $6,400 per month. So it's an extra $1,200 per month in their payments. So even if they were to try to purchase that property, putting 200 grand down, 20% down, at $6,400 a month, they wouldn't even carry, the tenants wouldn't even carry the property. And so what ultimately is going to happen is we're going to start to see a lot of pullback from the housing market as interest rates go up unless prices go down with it. But now Biden is going after this whole new agenda with housing that I think is going to do two other things. One, is going to push a lot of people into foreclosure that are really, really banking on these rents staying the same at least. And so as rents kind of pull back or the government has more of a reach into the housing space, we're going to see properties trade hands at levels that we can't imagine. So here's what he said. This came out today. As President Biden said last week, tackling inflation is his top economic priority. Today, President Biden is releasing a housing supply action plan to ease the burden of housing costs over time. By boosting the supply of quality housing in every community, his plan includes legislative and administrative actions that will help close America's housing supply shortfall in 5 years, starting with the creation and preservation of hundreds of thousands of affordable housing units in the next 3 years. When aligned with other policies to reduce housing costs and ensure affordability, such as rental assistance and down payment assistance, closing the gap will mean more affordable rents and more attainable home ownership for Americans in every community. This is the most comprehensive all of government efforts to close the housing supply shortage in history. The plan will help renters who are struggling with high rental costs, with a particular focus on building and preserving rental housing for low and moderate income families. The plan policies to boost supply are an important element of bringing homeownership within reach for Americans who today cannot find an affordable home because there's too few homes for sale in their communities, and it will help reduce price pressures in the economy as housing costs make up about 1/3 of the market's basket for inflation as measured by Consumer Price Index. So what he's saying, the target is to combat inflation, and housing is 1/3 of the basket. So his target is to combat housing. So what is he going to do? They have to take a big grip over housing and have more power and more control than ever before. Under the plan, the administration will reward jurisdictions that have reformed zoning and land use policies. So, for example, if you're in Los Angeles, R1, that's a zoning. That is for single-family residence. R2 is for duplex. RD 1.5 is for up to 4 units, and so on and so on. And so in certain housing tracts, there will be certain zoning, protocols. A lot of them in, Los Angeles, you might be in a residential community, so it's all R1. You can only build single-family homes there. Well, now he's going to be rewarding communities that are going to be increasing the density inside of these communities. So they're going to basically drag down the housing cost inside of these communities by allowing multi-unit properties, which might be beneficial for multifamily real estate developers, not so beneficial for people that own single-family homes in particular communities. Deploy new financing mechanisms to build and preserve more housing where financing gaps currently exist. Manufactured housing includes with chattel loans that the majority of manufactured housing purchases rely on. Expand and improve existing forms of federal financing, including for affordable multifamily development and preservation. This includes making construction to permanent loans, where one loan finances the construction but is also long-term mortgages, while more widely available by exploring the feasibility of Fannie Mae purchase of these loans, promoting the use of state, local, and tribal government recovery funds to expand affordable housing supply, and announcing reforms to low-income housing tax credits, which provides credits to private investors developing affordable housing, and the Home Investment Partnership Program, HOME, which provides grants to state and localities and communities use to fund a wide range of housing activities, ensure that more government-owned supply of homes and other housing goes to owners who will live in them or nonprofits who will rehab them, not large institutional investors. Work with private sector to address supply chain challenges and improve the techniques to finish construction in 2022 on the most homes since 2006, right before the housing bubble. So they have these ambitious goals, but if you scroll down here, what they want to do, financing more than 800,000 affordable rental units by strengthening the low-income housing tax credit. LIHTC offers federal income tax credits to private investors in exchange for investments in affordable rental housing. The House passed a reconciliation bill that would increase tax credit allocations, provide additional capacity for private activity bonds to finance affordable housing, target tax credits for housing that serves extremely low income, and make it easier to use tax credits in Indian countries. The President's 2023 budget also includes a provision that would provide additional subsidies through LIHTC to develop that and net new supply, and that would otherwise not be financially feasible given the long-standing bipartisan support of LIHTC. The administration looks forward to working with Congress to pass these, right? And this here, beyond financing challenges in recent years, the share of single-family purchases by investors has grown, comprising more than 25% of all purchases nationally in some months of 2021, with an even higher share in certain markets like Atlanta, San Jose, and Phoenix. Well over half of these purchases were made by investors with more than 10 properties, and almost a quarter of these purchases were made by investors with more than 100 properties. Large investors' purchases of single-family homes drive up home prices for lower-cost starter homes, making it harder for aspiring first-time and first-generation home buyers, among others, to access wealth-building opportunities from home ownership. So you see the narrative being pointed at. The narrative is the big corporations. The narrative is the landlord. The narrative is the investor. And the solution is going to be more assistance, more oversight, more control. That's why I believe that we're going to start to see a real challenge with the rental housing space as interest rates go up and this battle starts to really hit the field between investors and this administration. What do you think about the entire situation? Where do you see housing going over the next couple years with this new direction? Drop your comments below, hit the like button, subscribe here. Also subscribe to my second channel. It's going to be a podcast and a really cool interactive show starting next week. And then also LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, everything's in the banner. Catch you guys later.